It's called the State Capture Inquiry, a judicial investigation into alleged government corruption in South Africa involving billions of dollars of public money. Some say the ruling African National Congress is on trial. But how far can the investigation go? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hoda Abdelhamid. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to crack down on government corruption, and he could end up implicating members of his own ANC party. A judicial inquiry into alleged corruption at the top levels of government opened on Monday, but it doesn't have powers to arrest anybody or seize assets. It will examine claims of fraud in the public sector during former President Jacob Zuma's time in office. Zuma was accused of being under the influence of the wealthy Gupta family. It's estimated billions of dollars of state funds were stolen using corrupt practices. Famida Miller reports from Johannesburg.
The Commission of Inquiry is expected to hold public hearings until November this year, and the Commission could continue its work for another 2 years. So this is it's early days in terms of what South Africans may find out in terms of these allegations of corruption that reached the highest level, former President Jacob Zuma, and just how far he might have been involved in these allegations, the role he played with regard to an influential family here in South Africa, the Guptas, who are alleged to have used their political connections to benefit themselves both politically and financially. We are expecting to see quite important witnesses come forward during the week, ranging from the former Deputy Finance Minister of South Africa, who alleges that he was offered a bribe of up to $40 million by the Gupta family to take up the position of Finance Minister, which ultimately might have benefited some of their dealings with government, and also former MPs, Member of Parliament coming from the African National Congress. Of great concern at this point is the political ripples this may cause, what it may mean for the African National Congress and any involvement, the ruling party of South Africa, and any involvement it may have in these allegations, and what evidence might materialize and the prosecutions that could possibly follow.
We'll get to our guest shortly, but first, more on the story from Malcolm Webb.
When Dr. Radebe started complaining about millions of missing dollars of public money in 2013, he says he was repeatedly threatened and assaulted, one time by the police.
They were following me. It was at night.
He was a councillor here in the Free State in South Africa. He says the police stopped him right here at the gate of his farm.
They were having firearms. They shot at me with 3 bullets.
The funds were meant to set up a dairy farm to help black farmers. Doctor says they were being stolen.
It's almost normal for the government officials to steal from the poor. But this project was so big in such a way that you can't rest.
And prosecutors say these men were involved in the alleged corruption. 3 Indian businessmen, the Gupta brothers. During the rule of former President Jacob Zuma, who was an associate, the brothers were implicated in numerous corruption scandals and accused of trying to take control of the state. Zuma and the Guptas deny the accusations. The dairy farm was just one of the scandals. The project raised questions right from its very start. The Provincial Department of Agriculture supported it. It said that this entrance cost $200,000 to build. We're not allowed past here, but the building down there was meant to be a milk processing plant. It's never worked. And of the $18 million of public money given to support the project, prosecutors say almost all of it ended up in bank accounts of companies connected to the Guptas and their associates. Zuma resigned in February. At the farm, there hasn't been much activity since, but detectives have been busy investigating some of the scandals. But the Gupta's lawyer told us he's already shown that they're not connected to the companies involved with the farm.
It was established that the allegations made by the police and by the National Prosecuting Authority was simply incorrect, based on a complete misconception of their own case, and in some instances just false.
South Africans are waiting to see if there'll ever be accountability for the corruption scandals of the Zuma years. Political opposition say the public lost billions of dollars. David Chaka lost his son. Moses Chaka was a public auditor investigating the dairy farm in 2013 until he was abducted, tied to a pickup truck and dragged down the road. Badly injured, he was taken to hospital.
They called me and asked me to hurry to the hospital. Moses had passed on. When we got into the ward, he was still on the stretcher.
He says the inquest into Moses' death stalled. Police say it's ongoing. Millions may be missing. Moses tried to stop it and paid the highest price of all. Malcolm Webb, Al Jazeera, Free State, South Africa.
So let's get the thoughts of our guests. Joining us from Johannesburg, Ivor Sarakinsky, Academic Director at the University of Wits School of Governance. In Cape Town, Sanusha Naidu. She is a researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. And also in Johannesburg, Karyn Maughan, a journalist and legal analyst. Welcome to you all. Karyn, let me start with you. Can you just bring us up to speed with what happened on this first day?
Well, essentially what happened was that we saw the legal personnel in this inquiry really outline the basis of its investigation, again outlining that it was very much based on former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's State of Capture report and looking at the kind of issues that it would be addressing. Interestingly enough, we saw lawyers for former President Jacob Zuma, his son Duduzane, and the Gupta family, as well as another government minister, former government Minister Lynn Brown, also making it known that they wished to potentially contribute to this inquiry, in which they have been notified that they are implicated parties and that there is potentially incriminating evidence against them in terms of the evidence that will be laid in the coming days.
So, Ivor, I mean, we know who is implicated, the big names that are implicated in this case, but are we likely to discover more?
I don't think so. I think that the investigative journalists have done a superb job in bringing to light the facts of all the corruption that's taken place. And I doubt whether there'll be anything new that's uncovered by the Commission. And that raises questions about what the purpose or the effect of the Commission is.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask that to Sanusha. It's a bit difficult to understand how you have this huge case of corruption, collusion, maybe between the business world and the political elite, but then at the end of the day, that everybody might walk off free. How does that work?
Yeah, I think it's quite a vague and it's a very broad issue. I think in terms of where does this all end and what is going to be the end result of this commission. It's quite an important commission in the sense, it leads on from the former public protector's report and the recommendation made there. But I do think that at the end of the day, the question in the minds of maybe the electorate, the people on the ground, the South Africans, is what's going to be the utility of this commission? Are there going to be people that are going to be indicted on particular charges? Are there going to be punitive action? What kind of sanction are we going to see taken? And so I think in terms of where this is going to go, both in terms of monetary and non-monetary value, it's going to be important with regard to how it builds some kind of level of trust with the ordinary South Africans in terms of what the mandate of this commission is and the end result is.
Well, Karyn, from what we know already, from the Gupta leaks, from even what has been, from what we read of the report, it's quite clear that several members of the Gupta family are guilty. Former President Jacob Zuma has a role in all of that. So what happens next? I mean, if the commission says, yes, indeed, it confirms it all happened, what happened next to them? I'm sure people in South Africa would like to see things taken a bit further.
I think there's 2 points to be made here. The first is that former President Jacob Zuma has never directly addressed the allegations made against him by the former Public Protector's State of Capture report. Remember, of course, that he spent 4 hours in her office telling her why he was not prepared to answer very direct questions about his own son's direct business relationship with the Gupta family. And a number of averments from particularly the former Finance Minister, Mcebisi Jonas, that the Gupta family had in essence offered him the position of finance minister in exchange for pursuing their own interests and had offered him money to do so. Also, Fakey Mentor saying that the former president was in fact present when the Gupta family offered her a particular ministerial post. President Jacob Zuma has never directly addressed those allegations or done so under oath. And I think that's one thing that we can hope to see happen in this inquiry. However, the issue of prosecutions is a quite problematic one. We see that one of the prosecutions that was launched against the Gupta family in terms of accusations that they had essentially siphoned off money intended for poor black farmers into their own business accounts. That prosecution on the verge of collapse. In fact, a court in South Africa is going to make a pronouncement on whether it should be struck from the roll or, in other words, sort of temporarily thrown out of court for maybe a period of time or a longer period of time on the basis that the state was simply not prepared to pursue that prosecution. And I think that is an indictment of a prosecutorial and justice system in South Africa that seems woefully under-equipped to really take action with the kind of evidence that we've seen emerging over the past few years.
Well, Ivor, Jacob Zuma is sort of a man of 9 lives, I would say, in the sense that he has faced many corruption allegations in the past, even rape, and he has never been proven guilty of anything. Do you think that South Africans are looking at this commission, or this time they're hoping that he is finally going to be nailed, or they thinking, or there's an assumption that, okay, he's going to walk off from this untouched, just like it happened in the past?
The problem is that the commission doesn't have any prosecutorial power. So all it can do is make findings and make recommendations to the state president, Cyril Ramaphosa. The prosecution has to be done by the National Prosecuting Authority, and it's got to be investigated by the special unit in the police called the Hawks. And until that action takes place, and until perpetrators are in court and behind bars, this issue is going to continue to undermine public trust in political parties, in government, and in the future of South Africa. So it's a really serious issue. And the money for the commission should have been used to set up special units in the NPA and in the Hawks to do a proper investigation and a proper prosecution of the people involved. We know who they are, we know the facts. It's a question of capacity in terms of ensuring that justice is seen to be done. Without that, the big legitimacy issues, confidence issues aren't going to be resolved by this commission at all. The commission might just make things worse.
Well, Sanusha, President Cyril Ramaphosa said in a recent interview that the commission will go into the real belly of what state capture is all about. Now, how important is it for his own legacy that the commission is able to do its work in transparency, and more important maybe is that those found guilty are actually brought to justice?
I think there's 2 issues here. One is that he is going into an election, and this is his interim year before this election. So he has to be seen as he's tackling the very core governance issues of the country. When he came in after the resignation of former President Zuma, he came in and he started to show that he's going to take on particular issues. So you had the whole question about trying to, as Karyn had mentioned, the issue around the Vrede Farm case. He's got this commission of inquiry and case against the former SARS commissioner. So he's come out with this very real kind of sense that I'm going to tackle the challenges around state capture, around governance, around corruption. But the challenge for him is that the mandate of both the commission and, of course, the extent to which he needs to go further could complicate and could actually create complexities for him, because he doesn't really have a kind of power a base that could actually push him forward. There's a lot of fragmentation within the ANC at the grassroots, at the branch level. He's sitting in an NEC which is very finely balanced. He's got a deputy president who has got his own controversy. So I sense he's dealing with a lot of issues that he wants to go forward. He hopes that this commission will delve into the deeper issues and try and maybe come across as dealing with the crises of governance and state capture. But at the same time, he is he has compromises, he's got complications because of the level in which he can go forward because of the election next year, and he needs to also try and create some level of coalescence within the party. So in a sense, his maneuverability is a bit limited at the moment, and of course he can only hope that in terms of the recommendations coming out of the commission of how he moves forward. But then again, the question is, will he get what he wants out of it, or will it actually then become more complicated for him to move forward?
Yeah, because Karyn, is this just about Jacob Zuma and his dealings with the Gupta family and how much sway they held over him? Or somehow the ANC itself is under scrutiny?
I think one of the things that the Commission is going to be looking at quite closely is the so-called capture of a number of state-owned enterprises, including our state power utility, Eskom, defense company, Denel, Transnet, which was a railway agency. Now, the amounts of money involved in this alleged capture and so-called corruption are massive, and they impact directly on the lives of poor South Africans. We cannot forget for a moment that South Africa is one of the most unequal, if not the most unequal country in the world. More than half of our population lives in poverty. And so this kind of issue of money being wrested out of the hands of entities that are supposed to serve the poor, but are instead being used on the allegations or suggestions of evidence contained in Thuli Madonsela's report, being used to line the pockets of a particular family or particular political elite aligned to the former president, are deeply problematic. And I think if this commission is going to achieve anything beyond just the personality politics and the allegations of ministerial interventions and ministers essentially being chosen by a particular family, it's going to have to look at why it was so easy on the kind of evidence that we've seen emerging in, for instance, the so-called Gupta leak emails, for that family and people associated with them to allegedly be able to maneuver so effectively within these state-owned enterprises, score these contracts, and on what we've heard and read in the media through the Gupta leaks and from various reports, score massive contracts that they were simply not entitled to.
Well, so, Ivor, how do you think the ANC will emerge out of all of this? Because at some point, someone will raise the question how many people actually knew about all what was going on, and probably it will also push some people to scrutinize a bit closely how the party functions.
President Ramaphosa was the deputy president of South Africa when all this was happening, and he said in public he got a fright when he saw the extent of it. So what was he doing in the last 10 years as the deputy president of the country? So the ANC can't say that it's individuals, it's one family, it's an aberration. The ANC's been involved in this by keeping their eyes closed when their eyes should have been open. And at the same time, so many cadres of the ANC have been involved in this kind of behavior. The NEC and the top 6 of the ANC, some of those people are deeply implicated in these events. So it's going to be embarrassing for the ANC, it's going to be embarrassing for the government, and it's a major issue in terms of South African citizens having renewed confidence in public institutions, which has been shattered over the last 10 years. And the political fallout of that will be seen in the forthcoming election in 2019. And we're waiting to see what the implications of that are in terms of citizens expressing their opinion, finally, on this whole set of events.
Well, Sanusha, it does sound, at least from far away, that President Ramaphosa is already under fire somehow. Obviously, there's the economic issues. The rand is going down. There's the expropriation law that is stirring a lot and causing a lot of commotion in South Africa. But there are also people who are accusing him of using the idea of cleaning up to get rid of his own enemies.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has to show that he's doing something. There's definitely different interpretations of this in terms of how he's trying to clean up, who he's actually gone after, and whether or not these are the individuals that he should be going after, or should it be a wider net and a broader context in which he should be pursuing a much cleaner governance for the country. But again, I think, there's a lot of intricate complications and complexities around the fact that under his watch as well, part of this whole state capture, the resources issue, and the report itself takes place while he's deputy president. So I think you can't shy away from how he actually wants to go forward and who he may be seeing as individuals that he's trying to pursue through the means of the judiciary and the security sector, and of course how this puts within the broader plans of him being standing as the candidate for the ANC. But I think to a large extent the question does remain: what is the view of the electorate? What is the view of people on the ground, ordinary South Africans? Do they see this state of inquiry commission one that they actually have any kind of veritable trust in, or do they see this as a continuous way in which South Africa has moved in the last several years from 94 onwards, where there was the TRC as well, trying to bring people to book. But then we see that process, in a sense, also not providing the kinds of punitive sanctions and the actions, and of course the whole question of compensation. So again, these are things that South Africa has to deal with, and I think, in a sense, you're dealing with also a generation of new voters coming into the fold, where they just really live according to what their material circumstances are. And when they see this kind of level of state manipulation of resources and capture of resources, and their material livelihoods haven't been improved, it becomes a much more real experience for them on the ground.
And Karyn, do you think South Africans will be looking at every twist and turn during this whole inquiry? And also, as my last question, it's, South Africa was this model. It was thought that it was going to be the shining example for Africa. What went wrong?
I think that South Africans are quite exhausted and overwhelmed by the corruption revelations that have been linked to the Gupta family and have been publicized in those Gupta leak emails. This has been, a matter of public kind of discourse for at least the last 2 or 3 years. And South Africans are simply exhausted by it. The rhetoric that you hear over and over again is that people want, as you raised yourself, they want to see definitive action taken against people who commit these kind of acts of corruption. But not just that. They want to see people, government officials, actually being held accountable for a very wasteful, maladministration, where they're effectively treating the state money like it doesn't really belong to the people of South Africa, but rather to a political elite. So I think for the average South African, until such time as they see a successful prosecution, a conviction, and a jail sentence for those people implicated in all of this, this is not going to necessarily give them any sense of hope. But I think the issue is, and what's become apparent, is that this country has been vulnerable to the most profound levels of, interference from private individuals. And one of the things that the inquiry has stressed again and again is that it's not just about investigating those issues, it's about making sure they never happen again. And if there is a substantive kind of aspect to that is realized in this commission, then it will have achieved at least something, that we'll have some prospect that the kind of rampant looting, use of public funds, abuse of state entities for private interests may in fact be a thing of the past.
Well,
and
it is
until
a
such time as
debate
people
that
are
we will
behind
be...
bars in jail, I don't think anyone's going to believe that.
Okay, it is a debate that will go on for weeks and months, if not years, but we have reached the end of this program, so thanks to all our guests, Ivor Sarakinsky, Sanusha Naidu, and Karyn Maughan. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hoda Abdelhamid, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.